sit back, relax, and let's have a chapter chat. I'm your host, Jessica Foster, and I am honored to be here today with a New York Times best-selling author, Lisa Unger. Thank you so much for being here, Lisa.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
And you have a new release. It's called Served Him Right, and this is a thriller.
It is. Yeah, all my books are thrillers or psychological suspense or, whatever you like to refer them as, but they're all like very character driven and bad things happen.
And you have got to tell me how you decided to write these.
Do you mean like in general? Well, I mean, if that's the case, then I feel like I didn't pick thrillers, like they kind of picked me. So I've always had this really kind of dark and twisted imagination, even when I was a little kid. So I feel like I've just always had these kinds of stories in my head. And this has just been like a lifetime of like turning to the page to metabolize darkness. So that's just kind of, how my brain works.
And Served Him Right is very interesting. It grabs you from the moment you open the first page. So for people who haven't read it yet, let's give them a brief synopsis.
Yeah, absolutely. So this Served and Right is really a good example of how things work for me. Like, so I have usually have like kind of an obsession, and then it collides with like kind of something. It might be a trip or a news story or whatever. And so at the time of when I started writing Served Him Right, my obsession was plants. I was very interested in our relationship to nature and like sort of the substances that can heal and harm in different doses. And then I came across a news story where a family sat to brunch and, expected to have a meal where they were being nourished, but instead, two of the people walked away from that meal, and 2 days later, they had both died. And so I was very interested in this concept of like, the person who has that knowledge and can gather a family and trust, and then, something nefarious happens. So these kind of things collided. So at the beginning of Served Him Right, we start with a brunch, and it's not an ordinary brunch. It's actually an exorcism, heavy on the X. So Vera has kind of gathered the friends of her sister together to help her sister, but like get over this cheating ex, this big breakup that they've had. And so the point of the exorcism is to eradicate him from everybody's social media feeds. Unfortunately, by the time the brunch is over, um, the police are at the door, and Paul, Anna's ex, has not just been eradicated from people's social media feeds. He's been found murdered. And Anna, who has a very dark and dangerous history with men, is the prime suspect.
And that's where it all begins.
That's where it all begins. Yeah.
You take people, your readers, on quite a ride through your books.
Yeah, I'm always very like, deeply involved with my characters and my stories. I write without an outline. So when I sit down every day, I don't know who's going to show up. I don't know what they're going to do. In many ways, I write for the same reason that I read, because I want to know what's going to happen to the people who are living in my head. And so it evolves for me on the page very much in the way it will for my reader later. So I hope that they're as involved with the story as I am as I'm writing it. And there's definitely two camps. There's the people that write like I do, which is, I prefer to call it more like a gardener, like a seed is planted and then something grows, and then, you maybe trim it here and there, you give it light and air. And then at the end of a year, you have a book, hopefully. And then, but also many people do it the other way. They outline very detailed, sketches of their stories, and they have their characters that they're going to plug in and do what they do. And I think both camps have lots of success. Like, I don't think you get to pick. I think you just write the way you write, and that's okay. I feel very blessed that I get to make my living as a writer doing what I love.
Is it hard? Is it hard to make a living as a full-time writer?
I mean, I think it's, it can be very challenging. I think it's hard to become a published writer. There's anything that you want to do well, as in the job that you have, it's probably as difficult to be a successful published writer as it was to get published in the first place, So, I mean, I think that, I have worked very hard, but I've also, been very fortunate, which I'm sure anybody who is doing what they love and doing well at it can acknowledge that it's not just about talent or ability, although those things are a part of it. It's also about like luck, some of it, and hard work. So, yeah, I do think it's challenging, but I think if, you have a dream and you work towards it, a lot of times you can get close, if not exactly where you want it to be.
And do you still get that excitement when your book publishes, just like you did when you got that first book deal?
Absolutely. Yeah. Every single time, it's like Christmas morning when I get that box with the first like hardbound books. I always get goosebumps. I'm always so excited because you never really know. Like, from in my case, I've been writing since I was a kid. I started my first novel when I was 19. After college, I didn't really have the confidence to pursue that dream, so I went into publishing. And I was always like writing, sort of in the nooks and crannies of my life, like hoping that I could make it happen. And certainly there were days where I was like, I'm never going to be able to do this. I can't even finish a book. How am I ever going to get it published? I have a job and a life and all this stuff. But, I did make it happen. So I'm always so grateful. Like every single time that book comes, it's like the first time. I'm always beyond excited. I mean, so many people are afraid of failure, right? I talk to my daughter about this too, and I tell her, failure is the norm. Face planting when you're reaching for something big, like that's the norm. You are going to fall, you are going to fail, you are going to be disappointed even when you're doing the big thing. There's a slew of rejections waiting for you at around around every corner. And if you let those things terrify you, then you just don't do the thing. I think people don't understand that on the other side of failure is like you get up, you dust off, and you're like, okay, I'm going to do it again. And that's true for anything that you're learning how to do, or anything that's hard that you want to do. You just have to be prepared to, get up and do it again.
So I have a 13-year-old, and we were actually talking about this the other day because I noticed that sometimes when things are hard, it's like she almost doesn't want to try.
Yeah, but especially if she's already, like, really gifted and a lot of things come very easily to her. But this is, like, with my daughter, the same thing. Like, I would see her just kind of, like, if it was hard or she didn't get it right the first time, she would just be like, "I don't wanna do it." And I'm like, "No, that's the thing you have to do." And
Exactly.
you burst in your day when you have the most brain energy, right? Like like with math, like she's always been good at it, but it wasn't like anything that ever came super easily. So I would see her just kind of math homework to the end of the day. I was like, don't do that. I was like, lean in. You have to kind of lean into the things that are hard, right? Because that's where you grow. That's where you learn.
So it's so interesting because it's the opposite with my daughter. She is stronger in math.
There's so much pressure on kids these days that, I'm not sure there was when I was that age, but there's so much pressure to be perfect at everything, right? And, that reading writing piece is, there part of it is like love. Like you have to be like excited about it, because if you're struggling with it, then everything that you do is kind of a chore. Or if you're having trouble focusing on words, like the way I have trouble focusing on numbers, like when I see numbers, I'm like, yeah, I don't know what is that, right? Like that's not my thing. Words are all day long, every day. But like that, that's just my brain as opposed to somebody else's brain and we need all the different brains doing all the different things, right? But that love of reading sometimes I think comes later when they find the subject matter that they're most passionate about, because that's where they're going to receive all that information.
And we do need all brains in this world.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, you definitely need all of that because, the introverts and the extroverts, like we learn differently, we present differently. It's like, and those different skill sets are important and they can unify each other. And also the fact of when something's hard, you come together with other people to try to figure it out. Like that's another a collaborative thing that has so much power as well. And it's like just respecting each other's minds and brains and how we learn and how we work together, I think is so valuable for any organization.
You have such a good grasp on people and personalities.
Yeah, I mean, that is my number one curiosity. That's the thing that I'm the most passionate about is people and characters. Like how what makes us who we are. How is our brain chemistry, our addictions, our mental illness, our mental health, all of it, like how does it contribute to what we do in this world, how we present ourselves in this world. And that is the main driver of all of my stories. That the all plot flows from character, and nothing happens without that initial intense character voice for me. So I follow those people through their stories. It's not the story first and then the characters. It's the way plot flows from those people. So the overriding curiosity, interest, passion for me is psychology and people and what makes us who we are. That's, I think, at the beating heart of every single one of my books.
And do you do a lot of research for your books?
Yes, absolutely. Research is a big part of my life. So I kind of think of it as a continuum. It's reading, writing, researching, living, repeat. So that's how it works. Like usually the research will precede the story because I'm always obsessed with something. I always have like a deep interest in something and I'm kind of like digging into it, trying to understand it better. Like for example, like with Last Girl Ghosted, it was online dating. I was like super interested in that and how people relate to each other. And then, Confessions on the 745 as social media and how we're kind of giving our privacy away. And so like Served Him Right was plants and our relationship to nature. So these things are all like on my mind, and so I'm always digging into them. So that's inherent research, and then the story kind of flows from there. But then obviously sometimes I'm in the middle of writing and I'll sort of come across something that I don't know as much about as I need to. So it's a huge process, absolutely.
Is it a solitary profession?
Well, I mean, it is the writing of it is, the sitting down and writing, like I definitely do think you have to be an introvert, sort of at your core, to spend that much time, in a room writing. And it's not solitary in that, you kind of exist with these characters, and if you're really involved with them, they're part of your life, they're part of your like day-to-day life. And then the act of publishing is a complete team effort. There's no, there you can do all the writing alone in your room, but when it comes to putting your book out in the world, that's when it really becomes a team project. And I have an extraordinary publisher in HarperCollins Park Row, amazing editor, a brilliant agent who kind of navigates the big waters of my career, and I have a fantastic publicist who is constantly working, on things like this, like, coming on your show today and all that. So I have this kind of, big team in place for the publishing part of it, but the writing part, like the part where you're just sort of, you know, at your computer at the page, in many ways, that's, yes, very solitary.
And you're on book tour right now.
Well, it's funny because it's like it's such an extrovert activity, right? Like to be out on the road, like on stage promoting your book and talking to everybody. And so there is a part of me that it does have that, like it same with like, we were talking about brains. I think like the whole introvert extrovert thing, like I also think that's kind of a spectrum. So you can kind of exist in your introvert self, for me all the time is okay. But like I can also exist in my extrovert self and come out on the road. And yeah, it's really meaningful to be on the road and be talking to readers and booksellers and librarians and all these people who are as into your stories and characters as you are. Like I've written this book and it's mine to some extent, like in the writing of it, but then when it goes out in the world, then it belongs to my readers. And so and they get that book in their hands and they read it and it becomes their book. They bring themselves to the page, right? They bring their thoughts, ideas, their images, all that stuff. So it becomes theirs. And so being able to connect with them on the road and with booksellers and librarians who are like kind of out there on the front lines, like putting books in the hands, like to connect with all those folks is really special. And, interviews like this one, where obviously you're such a passionate advocate for books and for authors and for readers, and like being able to just kind of chat with you about that and how much it means to us, as people to be in story, to dwell in story, like that's a real gift. So even though it can be a little like hard, it's still, very joyful.
I would say that I am an extroverted introvert because
Yeah.
love being around people. I love public events, but I also find joy in sitting at home and reading a book.
Yeah, I think my daughter's a little bit like that too. Like she likes to be out there, but she definitely needs like battery recharge time. And it's kind of the same for me. Yeah, like I can be out and do all the things, but like I need like a place to recharge my batteries. Like I need to shut it down and kind of power back up before I can. Whereas like I think the extrovert gets a big charge out of the being out there, and the introverted part is difficult. Like that's where their battery gets run down. So it's just kind of an interesting brain energy thing.
What do you hope that readers get out of Served Hip Right?
So I hope it's a page turner and it keeps you up past your bedtime. But the biggest part of this book was, it was the relationship between Vera and Anna, these two sisters who were kind of bonded in trauma and by blood. And they love each other and they're at each other's throats, and yet they're fiercely like devoted to each other. So it's like that connection between the two of them. But also it was like, there's a current of like, these women who are herbalists who have this deep connection to the earth and to plants, and how we as humans also have this deep connection to the earth and to plants in ways that most of us don't realize day to day. So really I think the core of the story is about that connection, our connection to each other and our connection to the planet, and our responsibility to take care of our planet and to take care of each other. Like I think that's really the beating heart of Served Hip Right.
And that is so important. I live on the Gulf Coast, and we have such a beautiful area and beautiful waterways.
And especially in Florida, there's this very delicate karstic topography, which means that basically everything that's on the surface kind of goes down into the earth, and it goes through this very delicate system. So the Florida topography is incredibly delicate and vulnerable. And so it does hurt, I think, as a local, when you go to the beach, like the day after the 4th of July or something like that, and it's covered with garbage and people have left all their fireworks, and that the birds were traumatized and all that stuff. So there's a definite disrespect for nature that we see, especially in summer, which is kind of, I guess it's because that's when most people are outside. But it is, I think there's this idea that like we have dominion over the planet, and what that means is not that you control or that you are the ruler of the planet, but that you are the steward of the planet. And if we don't take care of nature and the earth, then, ultimately we're the ones that will be the most harmed by that.
So true.
My daughter is so aware of the planet and climate change and all of that, and she's always been like that, a nature lover, an activist out there doing the thing, cleaning up the beaches and all of that. And I think that's such a gift that this younger generation has. Like in some ways it's sad because they've inherited so many problems, but it's also made them so much more aware and and they're so like bright and enthusiastic and ready for change. So I think that's where all the good stuff is going to happen.
Are you already working on your next project?
Yeah, I have a short story coming out this summer in June on Amazon called The Safe House. The Safe Room. And then my 24th book, which will publish at the beginning of 2027, is finished. So I'm not ready to talk about it yet, but I will say that it is psychological suspense, and bad things will happen.
Well, when you are ready to talk about it, you'll have to join us again.
I would love to.
And those who are fans of thrillers, or even if you've never read a thriller, you've got to check out Served Him Right, which is out now.
You've been listening to Chapter Chat. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Happy reading!